Shut up. Don't say a word if you still want to live. I... The words barely escaped her lips before Grace's hand clamped over Nathan Cole's mouth. She dragged him backward into the darkness of the coat closet, her strength surprising. Desperate, the door shut with a careful click, sealing them inside. Only a thin blade of light slipped through the crack. Only the thunder of Nathan's own heartbeat filled his ears. Grace was shaking, but not with confusion. She had already lived this nightmare once today, just hours earlier. The mansion had been silent in that unnatural way only wealth could afford, too polished, too empty, like a stage waiting for something terrible to begin. Grace had been wiping the marble counter outside the study, her movements slow and invisible, exactly how she'd learned to survive. From inside the room, Evelyn Cole's voice floated out, calm and elegant. Grace wasn't listening. She never listened until she heard a name. Nathan. Her body froze, the cloth stilled in her hand. It has to look natural. Doctors don't question gradual decline, they expect it. And Grace's breath caught in her throat. Then another voice answered, smooth, confident. Daniel Cole, the brother who smiled too easily. I adjusted the dose, small enough not to raise alarms. By the time anyone realizes, the company will already be ours. I do D2. The world tilted. Grace's fingers went numb. The bottle of cleaner slipped from her hand and shattered against the stone floor. The sound exploded through the hallway like a gunshot. Silence followed. Then the study door flew open. Evelyn stood there, her face hardening in an instant. Before Grace could even lower her eyes, Evelyn crossed the room and grabbed a fistful of her hair, yanking her head back. You were listening. It was, no ma'am, I swear I wasn't. I didn't hear anything. It was an accident. Pain shot through Grace's scalp as Evelyn tightened her grip. You people are always listening, always pretending you're invisible. Grace's knees hit the floor. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. She knew better. Please, I have children. I don't know anything. I swear. Too. For a long moment, Evelyn studied her, searching for fear, for certainty, for guilt. Grace gave her exactly what she wanted. She shook, she sobbed, she looked small. Finally, Evelyn shoved her away. If you repeat one word, no one will ever find your body. End. Grace nodded frantically. Yes, ma'am, I swear. End. Evelyn turned away as if Grace had already disappeared. Grace stayed on the floor long after they were gone, her hands trembling, her heart racing, her mind burning with one horrifying truth. Nathan Cole was going to die, and no one else was going to stop it. That was why, hours later, when the front door opened unexpectedly, Grace didn't hesitate. Nathan had come home early. She saw him step inside in his tailored suit, confidence still clinging to him like armor. For half a second, relief washed over her. Then panic crushed it. She grabbed him. Now they stood pressed together in the closet, coats brushing their shoulders, the air thick with dust and fear. Please, if you make a sound, they'll hear you. Nathan's eyes widened, offended, confused. He tried to pull back, unaccustomed to being touched, much less commanded by the woman who cleaned his house. In 20 years, Grace had never raised her voice to him. Now she was risking her life. From the other side of the door came laughter, Evelyn's laugh, Daniel's voice. Nathan's chest tightened. Through the narrow crack, he saw his wife standing far too close to his brother, a champagne flute lifted casually. To patience, well, to timing, Xanaza going misting. Glasses clinked. Grace leaned closer. You weren't supposed to be here again. Nathan tried to steady himself.
Headaches, nausea, fatigue. The doctors had said stress, age. He was 58. It made sense. Until the dose this morning worked perfectly. He looked pale at lunch. Minus as Nathan's stomach dropped. It has to be slow. If anyone suspects, they won't. By the time he collapses, everything will already be signed. Add so. The room spun. Pain bloomed behind Nathan's eyes. His knees weakened. Grace felt it instantly. It's starting again. Oh, go! Nathan wanted to step out to confront them, to demand answers. That was how powerful men solved problems. But power meant nothing if you were already being buried quietly. Grace's hand slipped from his mouth, but not from his arm. I heard them earlier. They know exactly what they're doing, and they will finish it. It, not a vibe in tumor. Nathan looked at her, really looked at her. The woman he had never truly seen. The woman who had been threatened, hurt, and silenced for overhearing the truth. Outside the closet, Evelyn laughed again, soft, effortless. Something inside Nathan broke. Not loudly, completely. He stopped resisting. He stayed silent. And for the first time in his life, Nathan Cole listened to the person the world had taught him to ignore. If this moment moved you, please hit like and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because someone near you might be listening to this story too. The closet felt smaller with every second that passed. Nathan Cole stood rigid, shoulders pressed into winter coats that still carried the faint scent of cedar and dry cleaning solvent. His breathing was shallow, controlled only because Grace's hand remained wrapped tightly around his wrist, grounding him in the dark beyond the narrow crack of the door. The living room glowed with warm light and betrayal. "You should have seen his face this morning," Evelyn said lightly. He blamed the headache on stress. "Oh, that's the beauty of it," Daniel replied. "Men like Nathan never believe their own bodies are failing them. They think they're invincible." It stunned. Nathan felt the words land like blows to the chest. His jaw tightened. Every instinct in him screamed to step out, to demand answers, to reclaim the authority that had defined his entire adult life. He had negotiated hostile takeovers, faced congressional hearings, buried competitors without ever raising his voice. This was his house, his name, his marriage. Grace felt the tension in his arm immediately. She shook her head, barely perceptible, her eyes fixed on his in the darkness. There was no panic in them now, only urgency. "Please, not yet." No. Nathan swallowed. A dull pressure throbbed behind his eyes again, stronger than before. He shifted his weight slightly, and the room tilted. He reached out instinctively, his free hand brushing the shelf inside the closet. Something small rolled under his fingers. He froze. Grace froze with him. Outside, Evelyn laughed. "Once everything is finalized, I'll sell the house," she said. "Too many memories." "Way you won't miss him," Daniel said.
Almost bored. You never really did. And what day? Nathan's breath hitched, his chest tightened, not just from fear or rage, but from something colder. Recognition. How many nights had she sat across from him at dinner, nodding politely, eyes distant? How many mornings had he kissed her cheek while reading market reports, assuming silence meant contentment? The small object under his hand slipped. It hit the floor of the closet with a soft but unmistakable thud. Silence slammed down on the living room. The laughter stopped. Nathan's heart pounded so violently he was certain they could hear it through the door. Grace turned toward him, her face pale even in the darkness. Her grip tightened painfully around his wrist. Outside. Footsteps moved closer. "Did you hear that? The house settles. You're paranoid. The footsteps paused, then continued closer. Grace did not hesitate. She leaned in, her lips nearly touching Nathan's ear. "Don't move no matter what." Now, before he could respond, she gently but firmly pushed him back into the corner of the closet and slipped her hand from his wrist. The door opened a fraction, just enough for her to slide out silently, then closed again. Nathan stood alone in the darkness. Every second stretched unbearably long. His head spun. Sweat broke out along his spine, his palms slick against his sides. He could hear his own pulse roaring in his ears, could feel the poison. He no longer doubted the word moving through his bloodstream, weakening him from the inside. From the living room came the sound of glass shifting, a chair scraping lightly across the floor. Then suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the far end of the house. Evelyn gasped. "What was that?" "Garage, maybe. I'll check." Oh. Footsteps moved away from the closet, quick and alert. Nathan exhaled shakily, his knees threatening to give out. He leaned his forehead briefly against the wall, closing his eyes as another wave of dizziness washed over him. For the first time, the idea that he might not walk out of this house alive felt real. The closet door opened again. Grace slipped back inside, closing it just as quietly. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, but her voice remained steady. "We don't have much time. It's say go." Nathan stared at her, disbelief and something like awe mixing in his expression. "You made that noise?" She nodded once. "Boxes near the garage. I knew they'd go that way." Well, he studied her face in the dim light, seeing now the faint redness along her scalp where hair had been pulled earlier that day, the marks he had missed before. Guilt cut through him, sharp and unwelcome. "They'll come back. I am. Yes, which is why you need to leave now." He hesitated. Leaving meant accepting everything he had just heard. It meant abandoning the illusion of control he had lived inside for decades. Another sharp pang hit his temples, his vision blurred. Grace noticed immediately. She reached up and pressed 2 fingers gently against his wrist, checking his pulse as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "It's getting worse." "It is. Natri. I can still confront them." "Itch." Her eyes hardened, not with disrespect, but with certainty. "If you step out there, they will finish what they started. Not today, not with words." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. The truth was already inside him, heavy and undeniable. Grace cracked the closet door and glanced down the hallway. It was empty. "Follow me. Stay close. Don't speak." She stepped out first, moving not like a trespasser, but like someone who belonged there. Nathan followed, his movements slower, more cautious. Every step felt heavier than the last. The house he had built, the halls he had walked 1,000 times, now felt foreign and hostile. They avoided the main corridor, slipping instead into a narrow passage near the service stairs. Nathan had rarely used it, if ever. He had known it existed, of course. He simply had never needed it. Grace led him past the laundry room, past a side entrance he had never noticed, her hand occasionally brushing his elbow to steady him when his steps faltered. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere they won't look." A day. A burst of laughter echoed from the direction of the garage, distant now. Grace paused, listening, then pushed open a small side door. Cool air hit Nathan's face, sharp and grounding. They stepped outside. The backyard lay in shadow, the manicured lawn stretching toward a narrow service road beyond the property line. Nathan glanced instinctively toward his armored car parked near the drive. Grace shook her head before he could speak. "They can track it." End quote. She pulled him gently but firmly in the opposite direction toward the darkened street behind the estate. Nathan stumbled once, his strength failing him, and Grace caught him without comment, her arms slipping around his waist to keep him upright as they disappeared into the shadows. The lights of the mansion burned on behind them, bright, indifferent, and already no longer his. For the first time since he had built that house, Nathan Cole walked away from it without looking back. The street behind the mansion was narrow and poorly lit, the kind of place Nathan Cole had never noticed, despite living there for years. The gravel crunched softly under their shoes as Grace guided him away from the glow of the estate lights and into the darkness beyond. The night air was cool, but Nathan's skin burned from the inside out. He stumbled again. Grace tightened her grip around his waist, bracing him with a strength that surprised him. "I'm fine." The lie tasted bitter even as he said it. Grace didn't argue. She had already learned which battles were worth fighting. They moved quickly, keeping to the shadows, turning onto a side road that curved away from the property. The sounds of the house, music, laughter, the faint clink of glasses faded behind them, replaced by the distant hum of traffic and the chirring of insects. Nathan's breathing grew heavier, each inhale scraping his chest. His vision blurred again, and this time it did not pass. He stopped abruptly, one hand shooting out to brace himself against a brick wall. His knees buckled, and Grace barely managed to keep him from collapsing entirely. "Sit, just for a second." Together, she lowered him carefully onto the low stone edge of a drainage curb, crouching in front of him. His face was pale now,
The confident color drained away, replaced by a grayish sheen that made him look older than his 58 years. Grace reached for his wrist again, fingers steady as she counted under her breath. It's faster than before. Zittering. How long have you known? The question came out strained, each word costing him effort. Grace hesitated, then answered honestly. Long enough to be afraid. Not long enough to stop them sooner. A sharp wave of nausea rolled through him. He bent forward, dry heaving, his body convulsing even though there was nothing left to bring up. Grace held his shoulders until it passed, her jaws set, eyes scanning the street when he finally leaned back, gasping. Nathan laughed weakly. I used to think power meant control. I do. Grace said nothing. She did not correct him. She had never been invited into that illusion. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small bottle of water. The label peeled and faded. She held it to his lips. Small sips. He obeyed. The water tasted like rust and plastic, but it grounded him, pulling him back from the edge. As he drank, his gaze drifted to the houses lining the street, modest, close together, windows lit unevenly. This was a different world, one he had driven past countless times without seeing. Is this where you live? Grace nodded. A few blocks more. She glanced at him. So could you, Ober. The answer startled a weak smile out of him. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a small play-saging sedan, parked beneath a flickering streetlight. Its paint was faded, one headlight clouded with age. Grace opened the passenger door and eased Nathan inside, positioning him carefully before circling to the driver's side. The engine coughed to life as the car pulled away. Nathan's head fell back against the seat. Streetlights stretched drifted, slippery and unfocused, until a sudden realization cut through the fog. The hospital. Grace's hands tightened on the steering wheel. No. I have doctors. Private ones. Oh. She shook her head, eyes fixed on the road. Your wife has influence. So does your brother. Hospitals have records, cameras, people who recognize faces. Was falsy. He closed his eyes briefly. And the police. Her jaw tightened. Especially them. It is not The implications settled heavily between them. Nathan exhaled slowly, the truth bitter but undeniable. Then where? Grace turned down a narrow alley, slowing the car as they approached a small, weathered house set back behind a chain-link fence. Home. While gutting, she parked and cut the engine. The silence that followed was thick, but not hostile. Grace got out quickly, circling to Nathan's side. When she opened the door, the cool night air rushed in again, but Nathan barely felt it. His body felt distant now, heavy and unresponsive. She wrapped his arm over her shoulders and lifted with everything she had. He groaned softly as his feet scraped the pavement. A few nearby neighbors paused, watching with curiosity and suspicion. Grace ignored them. Her focus narrowed to one thing only. Stay with me. Wise. They reached the gate. Grace fumbled briefly with the latch, then pulled him inside the small yard and up the short path to the door. Each step was a battle, but she did not stop. When they were finally inside, she lowered him gently onto a sagging couch. Nathan lay there, chest rising and falling unevenly, eyes half open. Grace locked the door, then the windows, checking each one twice. Only then did she return to him. She knelt beside the couch, pressing cool, damp cloths to his forehead and neck, working methodically, as if this were a routine she had practiced 100 times before. Nathan watched her through the haze, his voice barely audible. Why? She paused, meeting his gaze. Because someone should. Maid, his eyelids fluttered. The room dimmed at the edges as consciousness began to slip away. One thought anchored him, clear and terrifying. The house he had built was no longer his, and the woman he had never truly seen was the only reason he was still alive. Nathan drifted in and out of consciousness as the night stretched on, time losing its edges. The small living room around him felt distant, like a memory he hadn't lived yet. Every breath scraped his chest, heat pulsed through his veins in waves, followed by bone-deep chills that made his fingers twitch against the thin couch cushion. Grace sat on the floor beside him, her back against the couch, one hand resting lightly on his forearm. She counted his breaths without moving her lips, the way her mother had taught her years ago when doctors were too far away and fear was too close. Outside, the neighborhood never truly slept. A car passed, music thumping softly. Somewhere down the block, two voices argued, then laughed. Life went on, indifferent. Nathan stirred, his brow creasing. "Evelyn?" Grace leaned forward instantly. "I'm here." Gone." His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. Sweat soaked his hairline, dampening the collar of his shirt. He swallowed, throat dry. "You used to look at me like I mattered." His nod of crow. Grace did not answer right away. She lifted the cloth from his forehead, dipped it into the bowl of cool water, wrung it out carefully, and placed it back against his skin. People change when power stops being enough. It was in vain, shakily, a humorless sound escaping him. "I spent my life believing loyalty could be bought." A sharper wave hit him. Then his body stiffened, muscles tightening without warning. His jaw clenched, teeth grinding as a low groan tore from his chest. Grace was on her feet in an instant. "Nathan, look at me." Worked. To seize. His eyes rolled back for a moment, his breathing uneven, shallow. Grace braced his shoulders, careful not to restrain him, speaking steadily, grounding him with her voice. "Breathe with me, slow. You're not alone. I won." The tremor passed, leaving him limp and gasping. Grace stayed where she was, one hand on his chest, feeling the frantic rhythm slowly ease. Her heart pounded, but she did not let it show. She stood, moved quickly into the narrow bathroom, and returned with more towels, soaking them with cool water. She worked quietly, efficiently, the way she always had. No wasted motion.